I can make it work again." The words fell into the silence of the DeMarco mansion like a stone into still water, soft, but enough to disturb everything beneath the surface. On the cold marble floor of the great living room, Leo DeMarco clutched a small red toy car to his chest. He was 6 years old, and his face was wet with tears he could no longer control. His shoulders shook with each uneven breath. He did not look up. He did not seem to hear anything beyond the silence of the car in his hands, the silence that had taken his mother's voice from him. 3 men stood around him, the best mechanical engineers the DeMarco family had on payroll, grown men with steady hands and quiet reputations. Their heads were lowered now. Their tools lay scattered on the velvet cloth they had laid out on the floor. They had tried for nearly 2 hours. None of them could make it work again. At the far end of the room, Lorenzo DeMarco stood with his arms folded across his chest. He wore a black silk shirt, the cuffs rolled once at the wrists, and a single gold ring on his right hand. His eyes were dark and sharp, the kind of eyes that had ended conversations in boardrooms and back alleys alike. He had walked in only minutes ago, straight from a meeting about the shipment at the Brooklyn docks. He had not yet spoken. Beside him stood Victor Moretti, his right hand, dressed in a gray 3-piece suit with a faint, unreadable smile resting at the corner of his mouth. Victor watched the boy on the floor the way a man watches a clock he is waiting to outlast. The grandfather clock in the hallway struck 11. From the doorway near the kitchen, a small figure stepped forward. Sophia Russo, 7 years old, wore a plain cotton dress and held tightly to her mother's hand. Rosa Russo, the housekeeper who had served the DeMarco family for 15 years, tried gently to pull her daughter back. Sophia did not move. Her voice was small, but it was clear. "Mr. DeMarco, sir, I think I know where it's broken." The room went still in a different way now. Not the silence of grief, but the silence of disbelief. One of the engineers blinked. Victor let out a soft, dry sound that was almost a laugh. Lorenzo turned his head slowly, his brow drawing together. He had not heard a child speak to him directly in months. He had not allowed it. And yet here was one, in his own home, daring to interrupt the failure of 3 professional men. He studied her, the plain dress, the small hands holding her mother's, the eyes that did not look away. Before Lorenzo could answer, Leo lifted his head. His cheeks were red, his lashes were wet, but something in his eyes had shifted, something that had been buried since the funeral 6 months ago. A small, fragile light, the kind a father would do anything to keep alive. "Dad," he whispered, his voice breaking on the word. "Let her try, please. Mom gave me this car." And for the first time in a long time, Lorenzo DeMarco did not know what to say. Rosa moved first. She bent slightly, her hand tightening around Sophia's small fingers, and tried to pull her daughter back toward the kitchen doorway. Her voice came out low, almost shaking. "I am so sorry, Mr. DeMarco. She does not understand. She is only a child. Please forgive her." But Sophia did not move. She did not pull her hand away from her mother either. She simply stood where she was, her small body steady, her eyes fixed on Lorenzo. There was no defiance in her face, no pride, only the quiet stillness of someone who had already made a decision and saw no reason to take it back. Victor stepped forward then, and the soft tap of his polished shoe against the marble was almost too deliberate to be accidental. "Boss," he said, his voice smooth as oil poured slowly over glass. "This little girl is taking advantage of a moment. We do not know what she is really doing here. Perhaps someone has planted her in this house. Perhaps someone is hoping to get close to the family through a child." He let his gaze drift sideways toward Rosa. Just enough. Just long enough for everyone in the room to feel the accusation without him needing to say the word. Rosa's face went pale. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. 15 years of service in this house, and a single sentence from Victor Moretti could undo all of it. Near the wall, Marco Bellini, the old consigliere with white at his temples and a black cane resting under his palm, watched without speaking. His eyes moved from Sophia to Victor and back again, slow and careful, the way a man reads a page he intends to remember. At the door, Tony the Hand Caruso stood unmoving, his right hand resting lightly on the grip of the pistol at his hip. He did not interfere. He never did, unless told. Leo's crying broke through the silence again, and this time it was louder. "I don't want another car," he sobbed, his small body folding tighter around the red toy, as if the rest of the room had become dangerous. "Mom gave me this one. Mom gave me this one." The sound was unbearable. It was the kind of crying Lorenzo had spent 6 months avoiding, the kind he had hidden from behind closed office doors, behind whiskey, behind shipments and meetings and the long hum of work. A child grieving a mother, alone on a marble floor in a house too large to hold any warmth. Lorenzo closed his eyes for 1 second, only one, and in that second, he saw her. Isabella, kneeling on the carpet in this same room, on Leo's last birthday with her in it, smiling that quiet smile of hers as she pressed the red car into their son's hands. "This one is special," she had told Leo. "This one is just for you." Lorenzo had not even looked up from his phone. He opened his eyes. "How old are you?" he asked. Sophia's voice did not waver. 7, sir. And why do you think you can do something that 3 grown men with proper tools could not? She thought about that for a moment. She did not rush the answer. When it came in a quiet voice, almost a whisper. "My father used to say that things don't always break all the way. Sometimes they only get stuck. You have to listen to them first." Lorenzo did not answer right away. The phrase moved through him like cold water through a closed pipe, finding a crack he had not known was there. Listen to them first. He had spent his entire life making things obey. Men, markets, whole stretches of waterfront from Red Hook to Newark. He had never once thought about listening to a thing before he broke it open. He looked at her again, really looked, a small girl in a plain dress, a child who had walked into a room full of armed men and grieving silence and had not flinched. "One chance," he said. Victor's mouth pressed into a thin line. He did not bother to hide it. Rosa let out a shaking breath and lowered her head. Sophia simply nodded once and turned toward Leo. Sophia knelt down on the marble, slowly, the way she might approach a small animal that had been hurt. She and Leo were the same size, the same age, almost the same height when kneeling, but there was something about her stillness that made her seem older than him. She did not reach for the car. She did not rush. She waited until Leo's breath had slowed, until his shoulders no longer shook quite so hard, before she spoke at all. "Can I borrow it?" she asked softly. "I promise I'll be careful." Leo stared at her for a long moment. His small hands tightened around the car first, then loosened, then tightened again. He looked back down at it, at the small red body still warm from his chest. Tears slipped from the end of his nose onto the painted roof. Then, slowly, he held it out. He did not pass it the way a child passes a toy. He passed it the way a person hands over something sacred, with both hands cupped beneath it, his fingers trembling. Sophia took it the same way. She turned it over in her palms, not looking up, not aware of anyone else in the room now. Her eyes moved along the small ridges of the wheels, the seam along the side, the painted underbelly. She tilted it once, slowly, then tilted it back. Her brow drew together. It was heavier than it should have been. She could not have explained how she knew. Her father had let her hold 100 toys in the workshop in their old apartment in Brooklyn before he died. Cars, robots, small remote helicopters from the secondhand shop down the street. They all had a particular feel, a particular weight. This one was wrong. It was wrong in the way a sealed envelope is heavier than an empty one. Something was inside that did not belong. She looked up. "I need a small screwdriver, please." Lorenzo lifted a single finger toward the nearest engineer, who silently unrolled the velvet cloth and selected the smallest tool from his set. He placed it into Sophia's palm without meeting her eyes. From across the room, Tony Caruso's gaze moved once. Just once. He looked at Victor. Victor had clasped his hands behind his back, the way he always did when standing in the presence of his employer. But Tony, who had spent 20 years watching men in rooms, noticed something else. Victor's right hand, hidden behind the back of his suit jacket, was clenched into a fist. The knuckles were white. Tony said nothing. He simply filed it away, the way old soldiers file away things that may matter later. Lorenzo did not see this. He had already turned away. He walked past the long velvet curtains and pushed open the tall French doors that led to the balcony. The cold November air hit him at once, and he was grateful for it. Below, the long stone driveway of the estate curved away into the dark gardens of Long Island. Beyond that, the faint glow of the city pressed against the low horizon. A soft red bruise of light that was Manhattan trying to sleep and failing. He took a cigarette from the silver case in his pocket. His hands were steady as he lit it. They had always been steady, even on the night they had told him about Isabella. He had not let his hands shake then. He had not let them shake at the funeral. He would not let them shake now. The smoke curled up in front of his face, and without meaning to, he remembered. The last night, her last night, she had come into his office around 11. The way she did sometimes when she could not sleep. But that night she had not been wearing her robe. She had been fully dressed, her hair pinned back, her face pale in a way that had nothing to do with the lamp. "Lorenzo," she had said, "there is something I need to tell you. Tonight." His phone had been ringing. The dock manager from Red Hook. A problem with the manifest. In a minute, amore. Just give me a minute. She had waited by the door. He could still see her, the way she had stood there, one hand on the doorframe, the way she had finally lowered her head and said, "Tomorrow," then, in a voice he had not stopped to hear properly. There had been no tomorrow. They had found her car at sunrise, off the coastal road near Oyster Bay. The brakes had failed, the report said. A clean accident, a perfect accident, so perfect that Lorenzo, who knew what perfection looked like in their world, had ordered no inquiry. He had not wanted to know. He had buried her, and the question with her, and the question had grown teeth in the dark. A soft footstep behind him. Marco Bellini stepped onto the balcony, his cane tapping lightly once against the stone. He stood beside Lorenzo for a long moment without speaking, the old way, the consigliera's way. Then he said, very quietly, in Italian, "Lorenzo, there is something I have to tell you. About Isabella." Lorenzo did not turn his head. He took the cigarette from his mouth. "What about her?" Marco opened his mouth. But from inside the living room, behind the heavy velvet curtains, there came a sound, small, sharp, final, a hollow clack against the marble floor. The red car had fallen. Lorenzo turned from the balcony before Marco could finish. The cigarette fell from his fingers, hissing once against the cold stone, and his footsteps were already moving back through the open French doors. Marco followed, more slowly, his cane tapping out the cost of every year he had carried it. Inside, the room was held in a different kind of silence now. The red toy car lay tilted on its side against the marble, one small wheel still spinning slowly. Sophia knelt exactly where she had been, the screwdriver frozen in her right hand, her left hand still hovering in the air above the empty place where the car had been. She had not yet moved to pick it up. Her face had gone very still, the way a child's face goes still when she understands, suddenly and completely, that she has just been given a chance to fail. Rosa had taken a step forward, her hand pressed against her mouth. Leo was on his knees again, his small body half twisted toward the fallen toy, his eyes wide and wet, and Victor Moretti was already moving. He crossed the room without hurry. He did not need to hurry. His footsteps were measured, almost theatrical, as if he were stepping into a stage that had been built only for him. When he reached the place where the red car lay, he stopped, looked down at it, and let out a soft, sympathetic sound that fooled no one. "Just as I said, boss." His voice was smooth, low, fitted to the room, the way a tailored coat is fitted to a man. "This child has no experience, none at all, and now she has done more damage to the young master's keepsake, the only thing his mother left for him." He turned slightly toward Lorenzo, his face arranged into something that wanted to look like regret. "This is not a job for a little girl playing pretend, sir." "She didn't," Leo's voice tore out of him, raw and high. "She didn't break it. It was already broken." Rosa took another step forward, her hands shaking now. "Sophia, Cara, come here. Come to Mama, please." But Sophia did not stand. She did not look at her mother, and she did not look at Victor. She bent forward instead, reached out with both hands, and picked up the red car from the marble. She turned it slowly in her palms. Her thumb traced along the painted side, along the underside, along the seam she had only just begun to open. She let out a small breath, almost a sigh of relief. No new cracks, no splintered plastic. The fall had only sounded worse than it had been. She looked up at Lorenzo, not at Victor, not at her mother, at him. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I can still fix it." The room did not move. Lorenzo studied her. He had spent his entire adult life reading the faces of men who lied for a living. He had watched grown men sweat through $3,000 suits trying to convince him of small, transparent things. And here, on the marble of his own living room, was a 7-year-old girl who had just dropped what might be the last piece of his wife on this earth, and her hands were not shaking. Her voice was not shaking. She had not made an excuse. She had said, "I'm sorry," and then she had said, "I can still fix it," and there was no calculation in it, no performance. Something in him, something he did not have a name for, leaned forward. Victor sensed it. He spoke again, faster this time. "Boss, enough. Let me take the child outside. Her mother can come too. We have the meeting with Ricci in the morning, and you need rest. We can find another way to honor the boy's mother. We can have a craftsman make an exact replica from the photographs. It will be better than this one. I will see to it personally. Let her finish, Lorenzo." The voice came from the doorway behind them. Marco Bellini had walked back into the room. He did not raise his voice. He almost never did. But the consigliere of the DeMarco family had spoken perhaps 4 full sentences in this house since Isabella's funeral, and 3 of them had been at the wake. When Marco spoke now, even Victor turned his head. Marco's hand rested on the silver top of his cane. His eyes were fixed on Sophia, not on Lorenzo. "Let her finish," he said again, quietly. "I have a feeling about this. A feeling I have not had in a long time." Lorenzo looked at his old friend, then back at the small girl on the floor. "Go on," he said. "Try again." Sophia nodded once. She did not smile. She did not thank him. She shifted her position carefully on the marble, drawing one knee up under herself and lowering the other so that her thigh became a small, steady platform. She laid the red car flat against her leg. Her father had taught her this, in the small back room of the workshop in Brooklyn, a lifetime ago. Never hold the thing in the air, Mia Stella. Always give it a place to rest. Things break when they are not allowed to rest. She fitted the screwdriver into the seam again, slower this time. Almost too slow. She did not push. She found the place where the metal wanted to give, and she eased into it with a pressure no larger than the weight of her own hand. The panel along the underside gave a soft, reluctant click. She lifted it, and then she did not move. For a long second, Sophia simply stared into the open belly of the red car. The engineers had opened this same panel earlier. Lorenzo had watched them. They had checked the battery housing, the motor coupling, the simple plastic gears. They had reported, all 3 of them, that there was no mechanical reason for the failure. But Sophia, looking down now into the small lit cavity of the toy, saw something the 3 of them had not. Soldered against the underside of the main circuit, half tucked beneath the speaker housing where a casual eye would have slid right past it, was a small black chip, square, industrial, the kind of component that did not belong in a child's toy. Her thumb went very still against the edge of the panel. She did not look up at Lorenzo yet. She was listening, the way her father had taught her to listen, and she understood, in that small, quiet way that 7-year-olds sometimes understand things they should not, that whatever was inside this car was something a great many adults in this room had been looking for. Sophia's brow drew together. She was small, and she knew she was small, but her father had spent years teaching her, in the small back room of their apartment in Brooklyn, how to read the inside of a thing. He had been a repairman before he died, with steady fingers and a quiet voice, and he had let her sit on the workbench beside him from the time she was 4 years old. By the time she was 6, she could tell the difference between a radio capacitor and a coil. By the time she was 7, she knew what belonged in a toy and what did not. The small black chip soldered beneath the speaker housing did not belong in a toy. It was square and dark and slightly too clean. There were 2 thin wires running off it, one to the speaker, one disappearing under the main circuit toward the motor casing. The solder around it was not factory work. Someone had done this by hand, someone careful, someone who had wanted the chip to be invisible to anyone opening the car for an ordinary repair. She looked up. "Mr. DeMarco, sir," she said quietly, "there is something strange inside." Lorenzo crossed the room in 3 steps. He had moved like that for men twice his size, in rooms much harder than this one. He knelt down beside her on the marble floor without thinking about the cost of the suit, and his face came close to the open belly of the car. When his eyes found the small black chip, his expression did not change. Exactly. It only darkened, the way a clear sky darkens before a storm has yet decided what kind it will be. "What is this?" he said. His voice was very low. Behind him, Victor moved too. He moved too quickly. It was nothing a casual observer would have noticed. One step, then another. But the steps were just slightly too fast for a man who had spent the whole evening pretending to be bored. And for 1/2 second, as Victor's eyes dropped from Lorenzo's shoulder to the open panel of the toy, a flicker passed through them. Surprise, then something colder, sharper, closer to fear. It was gone before he reached the rest of his face. Marco Bellini, standing 4 steps away with his hand resting on the head of his cane, saw it. He said nothing. He simply lowered his eyes the way an old man lowers his eyes when he has just been given something he intends to keep. Sophia did not look at Victor. She was looking at Lorenzo. "I don't think the car is broken because it's old, sir," she said softly. "I think it's broken because something inside is trying to work. The wire is loose. That's all. The car keeps trying to do what it's supposed to do, but the wire keeps slipping." Lorenzo's jaw tightened. The hand resting on his knee closed into a fist and then, slowly, opened again. "Can you make it run?" he asked. "I can try, sir." She hesitated, then added, "But I need a paper clip." For one breath, no one moved. Then, From beside the doorway, Tony Caruso's hand slipped into the inside pocket of his suit jacket. It came out holding a single, plain, silver paperclip. He stepped forward, knelt down on one knee in front of a 7-year-old girl as if she had been a made man of the family, and placed the clip into her palm. He did not say anything either. Tony rarely did. Sophia closed her small fingers around the paperclip. She unbent it slowly. Not all at once, not in the impatient way a child might unbend wire from a notebook, but in stages, the way her father had shown her, pressing it against the side of her thumb to feel where the metal wanted to give. When it was long and almost straight, she folded one end back on itself to make a narrow, doubled brace. She bent the other end at a careful angle. Then she leaned forward into the open belly of the car. The room had gone so still that Lorenzo could hear the long brass pendulum of the grandfather clock in the hall, counting out something that suddenly felt much larger than seconds. Leo had stopped breathing. His small hands were pressed flat against the marble. Rosa had both hands wrapped around the cuff of her own sleeve, twisting the fabric the way a mother twists fabric when she is praying inside her chest without moving her mouth. A few steps back, Victor stood with his arms folded across his chest in a posture that was meant to look casual. It did not. The blood had drained out of his face so completely that the gray of his suit looked warmer than his skin. Sophia fitted the bent paperclip against the small, loose contact. She did not press hard. She nudged it once. She watched it settle. She nudged it again. Her tongue pressed briefly against her upper lip, the small, private gesture of a child concentrating without knowing she was doing it. The clip slipped into place. She held her breath for 1 second. 2. The brace held. Very gently, she lowered the panel back into position. She did not snap it closed. She let it rest, half-seated, just enough to hold what she had done without putting pressure on the wire underneath. She placed the red car down on the marble floor. She sat back on her heels. She looked at Leo. Leo's eyes met hers. He gave the smallest nod a child could give, and still call it a nod. Sophia reached forward and pressed the small button on the top of the car. Click. Silence. Lorenzo did not move. Rosa did not move. Even the clock in the hallway seemed to wait. Then, faint at first, a soft electric hum rose from somewhere inside the toy. The kind of hum that belongs to a small motor finally finding its current. The wheels twitched. Once, twice, and the red car rolled forward across the marble floor, slowly at first, then steady, then sure. Leo broke. The sound that came out of him was not a scream, and it was not quite a laugh. It was the sound a child makes when he has been waiting 6 months to find out whether grief was permanent, and the answer has just rolled across the floor in front of him. He fell forward onto his hands and his face crumpled open and tears spilled down his cheeks. But for the first time since the funeral, the tears were the right kind. "It's working," he sobbed. Dad, it's working." Lorenzo did not answer his son. He was looking at Sophia, and Sophia, still kneeling on the marble in her plain cotton dress with a paperclip in her lap and a screwdriver beside her knee, was watching the car with the quiet, patient expression of a child who was not yet certain her work was finished. But the red car did not stop at rolling. After it had crossed perhaps 3 feet of marble, after the wheels had found their rhythm and the small motor had settled into a low, steady hum, something else began to happen. A faint sound came up from inside the toy, not the hum of the motor, something layered over it. A soft, dragging static. Sophia's head tilted slightly. Her hand, which had been hovering near the car in case it stopped again, did not move. The static caught, settled, cleared, and then, from the small hidden speaker inside the red car, a voice began to speak. It was thin, far away, the way a voice sounds when it has traveled through too many layers of plastic and time. But it was a voice, and it was a voice that everyone in that room recognized at once. Leo. Amore mio. Lorenzo went still in a way a body should not be able to go still. The blood left his face in a slow, falling line. From his hairline down, his knees gave out by perhaps an inch. He did not fall. He reached out and caught the high back of the leather armchair beside him, and his fingers closed around it until the knuckles turned the color of old paper. "Isabella, if you are hearing this," the voice went on, broken by static, "then Mama is not there anymore. I'm sorry, my love. I am so sorry." Leo did not understand the words at first. His face was still wet from before, his small chest still hiccuping from the joy of seeing the wheels turn. Then the syllables reached him, and the joy slid sideways into something else, something older than him. He moved before anyone could stop him. He half ran, half crawled across the marble on his hands and knees, and threw his arms around the red car, and pressed it against his cheek as if pressing it against a face. "Mom!" he cried. "Mom! Mom! Mom!" Mom Rosa pressed both hands over her mouth. A small, choked sound came out from behind her fingers. She did not move toward her own daughter. She did not know what to do with her hands. The voice from the car kept going, but it was thinner now, fighting the static. "Your father, he does not know. There is someone in our house. Someone who has betrayed us." Lorenzo's head came up. The look in his eyes was not grief anymore. Grief had been there for 6 months. Grief he knew. This was something he had refused to feel since the morning the brakes report had come across his desk. The thing he had stuffed down behind whiskey and shipments and silence. It was rising now in a hot, dark line up his throat. What did she say? His voice did not sound like his own. What did she say? The voice in the car kept going. "I found proof. Amore. I hid it, where they would never look." Inside, the A-sharp burst of static cut across her. "Ah," the speaker rasped once. Twice. Then nothing. The voice was gone. Only the steady hum of the small motor remained, and the slow, useless turning of the wheels against the marble. Leo did not understand that it had stopped. He kept his face pressed to the car. He kept whispering, "Mom, Mom, Mom," into the painted metal as if his voice could pull the other voice back through. Sophia leaned forward. Her small fingers reached for the panel and pressed against the side of the car, very gently. "The wire," she said, her voice low and careful. It slipped again. "The brace is holding, but the chip needs more. I can fix it properly, sir. But it will take time. I have to open it all the way and do it right." She looked up at Lorenzo. She had heard the voice. She had understood part of what the voice had said. And she had understood, with that quiet child's clarity she carried, that the words had not been about a toy. Victor moved. He took one step forward, and his voice, when it came, had been rebuilt back into the smooth shape it usually wore. He had had perhaps 15 seconds to find his face again. He had used them well. "Boss," he said, and the word was warmer than it had any right to be. "Let me take the car. Whatever is on that chip, it should be in a safe. I will lock it in the vault personally tonight. We can have our people listen to the rest in the morning, when everyone is calm. This is too important to leave with a child on the floor. It could be evidence. It could be no." Lorenzo did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The single word fell on the marble harder than the car had. He did not look at Victor when he said it. He was still looking at the place where the red toy had rolled to a stop against Leo's small body. Then, slowly, his eyes moved. Not to Victor. Past him. Tony. Tony Caruso was already standing straight. "Boss, lock the house. Boss." Every door. Every gate. The driveway. The side entrance. The kitchen service door. The cellar. "No one leaves this estate tonight. No one comes in. Not a delivery. Not a phone repairman. Not anyone." "Yes, boss." Tony was already moving toward the hallway, already lifting a small black radio from inside his jacket as he walked. Victor's hand, hidden behind the cuff of his suit jacket, twitched once at his side. "Boss," he tried again. "If I may." "You may stay where you are, Victor." Lorenzo's eyes finally found him. There was nothing on Lorenzo's face. Nothing. And that was the most dangerous thing his face had ever been. Victor had known this man for 12 years. He had seen Lorenzo angry. He had seen Lorenzo grieving. He had seen Lorenzo bored, which was the worst of them. He had never, in 12 years, seen Lorenzo look at him with absolutely nothing in his eyes. Victor lowered his hand and smiled. The smile took him 3 tries to find. "Of course, boss, whatever you need." Marco Bellini did not move from where he stood. The old consigliere had not spoken since he had told Lorenzo to let the girl finish. He did not speak now. He simply lifted his eyes from Sophia to Lorenzo, and Lorenzo, glancing at him for one short second, saw it there. "You see it now," the old man's eyes said. "You see it now, my friend. The war did not start tonight. The war started a long time ago. Tonight is only the night we admit it." Lorenzo gave him the smallest nod a man could give, and still call it a nod. Then he knelt down on the cold marble, on one knee, beside his weeping son, and laid one hand very gently on the top of the red toy car. It was past 1 in the morning when they moved to Lorenzo's private study. The engineers had been dismissed, escorted out by Tony's men, and confined to the staff house on the far edge of the estate. The mansion itself had been sealed. Every door, every window, every lock checked twice. 2 of Tony's most trusted men now stood in the long hallway outside the study, their hands folded in front of them, their eyes on the entrances. Only 5 people remained in the room. Lorenzo sat in the high-backed leather chair behind his father's old desk, a cut crystal glass of whiskey held in one hand, the ice in it long melted. Marco Bellini had taken the armchair across from him, his cane resting against his knee. Tony Caruso stood near the door, where he could see both the windows and the hallway at once. On the long velvet couch under the bookshelves, Rosa sat with Leo curled against her side. The boy had finally cried himself into sleep, his cheek pressed against her shoulder, his small arms still wrapped tightly around the red car. He had refused to let go of it even in sleep. Rosa was stroking the dark curls at the back of his head with a hand that would not stop trembling. And in the far corner of the study, at a low side table that Lorenzo had pulled forward for her, Sophia was working. The toy car lay opened on a folded silk handkerchief. Lorenzo himself had placed there. A small lamp had been bent down low to throw light directly onto the exposed circuit. Sophia knelt on a cushion, her brow furrowed in concentration, the screwdriver moving slowly in her fingers. Lorenzo had told her she did not have to keep working. He had told her she could rest. She had only looked up at him and said, "He needs his mom's voice to come back, sir," and gone back to the wire. She should not have been there at all. A child should not be in a room where men were about to talk about murder. But Lorenzo did not want her out of his sight tonight, and Rosa, with one look at her daughter's small face, had understood and not argued. For a long minute, none of the adults spoke. Then Marco shifted in his armchair. The leather creaked softly. He set the silver head of his cane against his palm and leaned forward. "Lorenzo," he said. His voice was low, the way old men speak when they have been carrying something heavy for a long time. "I have suspected this for months. Isabella's death. It was not an accident." Lorenzo's hand tightened around the whiskey glass. For a moment, he did not look at his consigliere. He looked at the ice in his drink. Then, slowly, he lifted his eyes. "You knew." His voice was perfectly flat. "And you said nothing to me." "I did not know. I suspected." "There is a difference, my friend, and you know it. You have made me live by that difference for 30 years. You suspected." "Yes, for months. Yes." Lorenzo set the glass down on the desk. The small sound of the crystal on the wood was sharper than it should have been. "Marco, you are a brother to me. You stood at my father's grave with me. You stood at hers." His voice did not rise. It only got quieter. "And for months, you watched me drink my way through the nights and you said nothing." "I had no proof, Lorenzo." "You had a feeling." "I had a feeling, yes. And in our world, a man does not put a feeling against the right hand of his boss without proof. Not even an old man like me. You would not have believed me. You did not want to believe anything 6 months ago. You wanted the world to be quiet, so the noise in your chest would be quiet too. I let you have that." "I am sorry." "I am not sorry." He said the last 2 sentences in the same breath. Lorenzo did not answer for a long time. Then he picked up the glass again, drained half of it, and set it down. "And tonight?" he asked. "Tonight is no longer a feeling," Marco said simply. "Tonight, a 7-year-old girl found what 3 of our engineers could not, and what I will tell you now, Lorenzo, those 3 engineers were chosen for tonight by Victor. Personally, he brought them here himself this evening, before the meeting." Tony, by the door, made a small sound in his throat. It was not quite a word. It was the sound of a man whose suspicions had just been confirmed. Lorenzo closed his eyes. In the corner, Sophia bent closer over the toy car. She did not look up, but her small ears were listening. Children always listen. When Lorenzo opened his eyes again, he turned them toward her. Slowly, almost as if afraid the question would frighten her. "Sophia," he said. His voice had gentled in a way no one in that room except Marco had ever heard before. "How did you find it?" She lifted her head. Her hair had fallen forward over one cheek. She pushed it back with the side of her hand, the way her father had pushed his hair back, and she thought for a small moment before she answered. "The car was heavier than it should have been, sir. That was the first thing." She turned the small piece of the panel in her fingers as she spoke, almost without noticing. "My father, he used to say that everything has its own sound when you shake it. A radio sounds one way, a clock sounds another way, a toy that has a battery and a motor, you can hear them inside, but they are quiet, soft sounds. This one was not soft. There was something inside that did not roll the way the rest rolled. It hit the side wrong, so I knew there was something there that should not be there." She paused. Then she added, more quietly, "He used to say that if a thing is heavier than it looks, somebody put something inside it that they did not want anyone to find." Lorenzo sat back in the leather chair. He looked at her. For the first time in 6 months, Something inside the cold black room of his chest moved. It was not relief. He did not have a name for it yet. It was something warmer, smaller, like a single coal that had been buried in ash and was now, very faintly, lit again. "Your father," he said. "Where is he?" "Sophia," the little girl looked down at her hands. "Rosa," on the couch, answered for her. Her voice was thin. "He passed 2 years ago, Mr. DeMarco. An accident at the workshop where he was employed. Some scaffolding gave way. He was working underneath." Lorenzo lowered his head. For a long second he did not move. Then he said, very quietly, "I am so sorry, Rosa. I did not know." Rosa nodded once, and did not trust her voice to say anything more. Sophia turned back to the car. She did not cry. She had finished crying for her father a long time ago, in the small back room of an apartment in Brooklyn that no longer had any father in it. She did not lift her face from her work, but Lorenzo saw the way her small thumb pressed once against the inside of her wrist, and he understood. It was the gesture of a child who carried a grief older than she was, and who had learned to carry it without letting it spill. Beyond the heavy curtains of the study, the long stone driveway of the DeMarco estate ran out into the dark. Somewhere near the far end of it, parked just past the wrought iron gates where the security cameras lost their angle, a black SUV sat with its engine off and its headlights dark. Inside, in the soft blue glow of a cell phone screen, Victor Moretti held the device pressed against his ear. His other hand gripped the leather of the steering wheel hard enough to whiten the knuckles. The smooth voice he had worn in front of Lorenzo all night was gone. What remained was something thinner, something quicker. "Salvatore," he said, "we have a problem. A big one." He listened for a moment. His jaw worked. That car, the boy's toy, the red one. He drew a short, sharp breath. She hid everything in it. Isabella, everything. The recordings, the names, all of it. He paused. "Tell your people to be ready. We are doing this tonight." 3 a.m. The mansion had finally gone quiet. Rosa and the children had been moved into the small guest suite off the study. Marco had taken the armchair by the fire, his cane laid across his knees, and refused to leave. Lorenzo had folded himself onto the long leather couch in the study with his suit jacket still on and his gun in his right hand, and somewhere between 2:30 and 3, he had let his eyes close for what he had told himself would only be a minute. The sound that woke him was the sound of glass. Not one window. 3 at once. Somewhere on the lower floor. On the far side of the house. 3 panes shattered in almost the same breath. The sound traveled up through the marble staircase and into the study like a held note finally being struck. Lorenzo was on his feet before his brain had caught up with his body. The gun was already in his hand. The study door slammed open, and Tony was in the room, his sidearm drawn, his radio in his other hand, his face hard the way Lorenzo had only seen it twice in 20 years. "Boss." His voice was low and fast. "Back of the house. 6, maybe more." Through the garden, a burst of gunfire answered him from somewhere down the hall, sharp and quick, and then the deeper return of one of Tony's men on the lower landing. "Get the boy," Lorenzo said. He was already moving. The guest suite was 3 doors down. He crossed the distance in long strides, the heels of his shoes silent on the runner carpet. He shouldered the door open, and what he saw inside stopped him for 1 full second. Rosa was on her feet beside the bed, her face the color of paper, her arms half raised the way a mother's arms come up before she has even decided what she is going to do with them. Leo was sitting up against the headboard, his eyes wide, his small body wrapped in a blanket. The pillows around him were still warm from sleep, and in the middle of the room, kneeling on the rug in her stockinged feet, Sophia had her small pink canvas backpack open on the floor. She had already taken the red car off the nightstand. She was already zipping it inside the bag. She looked up when Lorenzo came in. Her face was small and pale, but her hands were not shaking. "I think they came for this, sir," she said softly. Lorenzo stared at her. A 7-year-old girl, 3 rooms away from gunfire, had woken up, gotten out of bed, walked across a strange floor in the dark, and reasoned faster than most grown men in this house could have. She had not screamed. She had not cried. She had simply understood and acted. Out in the hall, 2 shots cracked very close, and then a heavier thump. Tony's voice came through the radio at his hip, clipped and calm. 2 down, east hallway, 3 more coming through the kitchen. Lorenzo crossed the room in 3 steps. He scooped Leo up off the bed in one arm, blanket and all, and held out his free hand to Rosa. "Stay close, behind me. Do not stop. Do not look back, no matter what you hear. Do you understand?" Rosa nodded. She could not seem to speak. She reached and took Sophia's hand. And Sophia, with the small pink backpack now slung tight across her shoulders, fell in behind Lorenzo without a word. In the hallway, Marco was already there, his cane abandoned, a black pistol in his hand that none of them had seen him produce. He moved better than a man his age had any right to move. He took the rear of the small group without being told, and his eyes did not leave the dark stretch of corridor behind them. They went down the back staircase. Tony's voice came again on Lorenzo's hip, sharper this time. "Boss, East Hall clear. Library is hot. Do not come through the library. Copy." They turned at the second landing, went down the narrow servant's stair instead. Halfway down, 2 muzzle flashes lit up the dark below them, and Tony, somewhere on the lower floor, answered them with 3 quick shots, and a 4th that punched a heavier note than the first 3. The flashes from below stopped. At the foot of the stairs, in the small mudroom that led to the kitchen garden, Victor Moretti was waiting. He was breathing hard. There was a small graze along his left temple, just enough to bleed and not enough to mean anything. The gun in his right hand was held loose against his thigh. In the casual way men hold guns when they have not actually used them in the last 2 minutes. "Boss." He stepped forward at once, his free hand reaching out as if to take Leo from Lorenzo's arm. "Boss, give me the boy. I'll take him through the cellar to the east garage. The cars are clean. I checked them myself an hour ago." Lorenzo did not move. He looked at Victor. He looked at the gun, held a little too loosely in Victor's hand, at the cut on his temple that was bleeding in a very particular shape, at the small bead of sweat at his hairline that did not belong on the face of a man who had been actually fighting his way down through 3 floors of attackers. He looked, most of all, at Victor's eyes. And in his head he heard Sophia's voice, very quietly. He chose the engineers tonight. Personally, he brought them here himself. No, Lorenzo's voice was even. His arm tightened around Leo by perhaps a 1/4 inch. He did not raise the gun in his other hand, but he did not put it away either. "You go and check the front gate, Victor. I want eyes on that road. Now." Victor's smile did not slip. Exactly. It only thinned. He held it for 1 heartbeat too long. The hand he had been reaching out came back to his side. "Boss, with respect, I should be with you. The boy, the gate, Victor." Now, for 1 second, something looked out of Victor's eyes that Lorenzo had never quite seen in them before. It was naked. Then the smooth surface came back across it, and Victor nodded once, almost a small bow. "Of course, boss." He turned and went up the corridor toward the front of the house at a run. As soon as he was around the corner, Lorenzo did not waste another breath on him. Marco, the wine cellar door. Marco was already there. The DeMarco wine cellar was famous in 3 boroughs for its private collection. What was not famous, because Isabella had made sure it was not, was the second door at the back of it. She had asked for it the year after Leo was born. "Just in case. Amore," she had said. "Just in case. A mother thinks of these things." Lorenzo had laughed and signed off on the construction the next morning, the way a man humors the small fears of a woman he believes will never need them. The door behind the 3rd wine rack opened onto a narrow concrete tunnel that ran for almost 120 yards under the gardens, and came out in the old chauffeur's cottage past the orchard wall. 3 of Tony's most trusted men were already there, and 2 of the family's clean cars, and a single black SUV with its engine warming. They moved through the tunnel at a half run. Lorenzo carried Leo the whole way. Marco brought up the rear with his pistol still raised. Behind them, the sound of gunfire grew thinner, then more distant, then was finally swallowed by the concrete. Halfway through the tunnel, in the dim pool of one of the work lights, Sophia reached up in the dark and found Leo's small hand where it hung over Lorenzo's shoulder. She wrapped her fingers around it and squeezed. "Don't be scared," she whispered. "I'm here." Leo did not say anything. He only nodded against his father's neck, and underneath his other arm, pressed tight against his chest, was the red car, still wrapped in the soft pink canvas of a 7-year-old girl's backpack. The black SUV crossed the Verrazano Bridge a little before 4 in the morning. No one in the car spoke. Leo had fallen asleep again, his head against his father's chest, the red car still wrapped inside the pink backpack, now pressed under Lorenzo's arm. Sophia sat between Rosa and the door, her small body very straight, her eyes fixed on the dark water below the bridge. She had not let go of her mother's hand once since the tunnel. Marco rode in the front passenger seat. He had not put the pistol back in his coat. He held it loosely across his thigh and watched the side mirror the entire way. They came off the bridge into Brooklyn and turned 3 times into smaller and smaller streets, and the SUV finally stopped in a narrow alley behind a row of shop fronts on a quiet block in Bensonhurst. From the outside, it was nothing. A faded green awning, a hand-painted sign that said Carmine's Pizza, established 1962. The lights inside were off. Steel grates had been pulled down across the front window. The whole block was asleep. Marco led them through a side door beside a dumpster. He unlocked it with a small brass key, then a second key, then a numeric pad set into the wall behind a panel that did not look like a panel. The third door inside was steel, 3 inches thick, and its side open onto a different world entirely. Past the dough mixer and the cold storage and the small office that smelled of oregano, Marco took them up a narrow back staircase. At the top was a single apartment that took up the entire second floor of the building, soundproofed walls, reinforced windows, a second steel door at the top of the stairs. Inside, the rooms were plain but clean, lived in just often enough to be warm, with stocked cupboards and made beds and 4 matching coffee mugs upside down on a wooden tray. It was one of 3 safe houses in the 5 boroughs whose existence Marco Bellini had never written down anywhere. Lorenzo himself had only known about it for a year. Tony was learning about it tonight. Lorenzo set Leo down on the long couch under the front window and tucked the blanket from the SUV around him. The boy did not wake. He turned his face into the cushion and slept the way only a child can sleep after his world has been cracked open and put back together in the same night. Lorenzo turned. Sophia was standing in the middle of the small living room with her backpack still on her shoulders, her stocking feet planted on the rug, her face very pale. He crossed to her, knelt down on one knee, and lifted her gently by the waist up onto the wooden kitchen table behind her. He did it carefully, the way a man handles a thing he does not yet know how to handle. "Sit, Piccola." His voice had gone soft again. "Let me look at you." He checked her quickly, the way men in his line of work check for wounds. Hands first, then arms. Then he tilted her chin up with 2 fingers and looked at her face in the lamplight. There was a small scrape across her left elbow from where her arm had caught on the tunnel wall in the dark. Nothing else. "You are not hurt." She shook her head. "No, sir." Then her hands began to shake. It came on her all at once, the way it sometimes does with children. The tunnel and the gunfire and the running and the strange men with masks and the smell of cordite. All of it caught up with her at the same time, and her small fingers started to tremble against her knees. She did not cry. She just looked down at her hands as if they belonged to someone else, surprised. Lorenzo stepped back half a step and let Rosa come past him. Rosa pulled her daughter into her arms without a word. She wrapped both arms around her, pressed her cheek against the top of Sophia's head, and only then did her own face come apart. She did not let Sophia see. She bent her head and the tears slid down silently into her daughter's hair. "I'm sorry, Mr. DeMarco." Her voice was the smallest it had ever been in 15 years of service. "I am so sorry. I should have taken her home hours ago. The moment she stepped forward in the living room, I should have taken her. This is my fault. This is my fault." Lorenzo shook his head once. "It is not your fault, Rosa." He said it quietly. He did not say the rest of what he was thinking, which was that none of this was anyone's fault except his own, for being the kind of man whose house had become the kind of house where a small girl who fixed things was no longer safe. He turned away from them, because he did not want either of them to see his face just then, and crossed the room to where Marco was already setting up. The old consigliere had cleared the dining table and unfolded a slim black laptop from the cupboard. Beside it, he laid out a small case of cables, a card reader, and a set of tools that did not look like tools belonging to an old man with a cane. Marco Bellini had not lived to be 70 in their world by being only one thing. "The chip," Marco said. He held out a flat palm. Sophia, from the kitchen table behind them, slid down off the wood and patted across the rug. She unzipped the pink backpack on the table and lifted out the red car. She did not pass it to Marco. She passed it to Lorenzo. Lorenzo carried it to the dining table and set it down on the cloth. Sophia climbed up onto the chair next to Marco's, knelt on the seat to give herself the height she needed, and reached for the screwdriver Marco had laid out. "You should rest, Piccola," Marco said gently in Italian. "I know how the wire goes, sir," Sophia answered in English, because she did not yet have all her Italian words. "The brace I made is still inside. If you pull it out wrong, you will break the chip." Marco looked at her for a long second. Then he looked at Lorenzo. Lorenzo only nodded. Marco moved the laptop closer to the child. For the next 2 hours, they worked. Sophia opened the car with the slow care she had used in the mansion, and this time she did not stop at the brace. She unsoldered nothing. She did not have the heat for that. But she lifted the chip out of its small slot with the very edge of the screwdriver, the way her father had once shown her with the back of a broken transistor radio in a bedroom in Brooklyn, and she handed it across to Marco between her thumb and forefinger. as if she were handing him a piece of glass. Marco fitted it into the card reader. He attached the card reader to the laptop. There was a password layer. 2 of them. He worked on the first for half an hour and broke through it. The second held longer. At one point he muttered something in Italian that no one translated for Sophia. She bent forward and quietly pointed to one of the wires running off the chip housing, and she said, "That one is the data line, sir. The other one is just power. My father showed me. The data one is the thin one." Marco stopped, looked at the 2 wires, swore very softly in Italian again, and switched his connection. The second password fell open 4 minutes later. The screen filled. There were 3 audio files. There were 47 documents. There were photographs. There were what looked like scanned pages of a ledger. Lorenzo poured himself a glass of water from the tap, because he no longer trusted himself with whiskey, and he sat down at the table. Marco clicked the first audio file. A faint hiss, then Isabella's voice. Clear, this time, steady. She had recorded it carefully, in a quiet room, with a good microphone. "Leo, my darling. If you are listening to this, it means I am not there anymore. I am so sorry, my love. There were things I was trying to fix, and I was not able to fix them in time. I want you to know that I loved you more than any voice in any small toy can ever say. Please be brave, my brave boy. Please listen to your father. Please look after him. He does not always know how to be looked after. That is a job that mothers do, and now it will have to be yours sometimes. I love you. I love you. I love you." The recording ended. Leo did not stir on the couch. Rosa pressed her hand to her mouth. Sophia stared down at the table. Lorenzo did not move. Marco let 1 full minute pass before he clicked the second file. This one was different. It had been recorded badly. On the move, the microphone muffled, as if hidden inside a pocket or a handbag. There was the sound of a door, footsteps on a hard floor, then 2 voices, low. The first was Victor. There was no mistaking it. He is not the man his father was. He never has been. He thinks the docks run themselves. He thinks the cards deal themselves. If we move now, we move clean. Salvatore, your people on the south side, mine on the north. We cut the head, the body falls in a week. A second voice. Older, rough, Salvatore Ricci. And the wife? A pause. She is the only one in that house with eyes. She has been asking questions. She has been making notes. I have seen her at his computer when she thinks no one is watching. She is becoming a problem. Then solve the problem, Victor. Solve it before she solves you. The recording ended. Lorenzo's hand on the glass of water had gone perfectly still. Marco did not look at him. He simply clicked the third file. The third recording was the worst. It opened mid-sentence, mid-confrontation. Isabella's voice, no longer steady, higher, sharper. The voice of a woman who had decided, I know everything. Victor, I have it all. The accounts, the names, the meetings, every word you said to Salvatore last Tuesday in the room above the cigar shop. I am telling Lorenzo tonight. Victor's voice, low, too calm. Isabella, do not. Isabella, me, do not. You used my husband's name and my husband's house and my husband's trust, and you were going to take his life. I am telling him tonight, Victor. I am telling him as soon as he gets off that call. A pause. Long. The sound of breathing. Then movement. A scrape. A sharp intake of breath. The crack of something hitting wood. A grunt that was not Isabella's. The dull, terrible sound of a body striking something heavy. Then a softer sound. Almost a sigh. Then silence. The recording ran for another 12 seconds of nothing before it cut off. Lorenzo did not stand. He did not move at all. He sat at the table in the small apartment above a closed pizza shop in Bensonhurst. And his right hand, the hand that had held a gun steady through more cold mornings than most men could count, began to shake. It had never shaken before. Not once. Not on the day his father died. Not on the day they had told him about Isabella. It shook now. He lowered it slowly to the table and pressed it flat against the wood, palm down, until the trembling stopped. When he spoke, his voice was very low and very calm, and it did not sound like anything human. It was him. He looked up. He looked past Marco. He looked at the wall where there was nothing to see. He killed her. Lorenzo stood up from the table without a word. He walked across the small apartment, past the couch where Leo still slept, past Rosa, who lowered her eyes as he passed, and past Sophia, who had carefully closed the panel of the red car back into place. He did not look at any of them. His face had gone past anger into the place beyond anger, where men in his world became dangerous in a quiet way. He went into the small back bedroom at the end of the hall and shut the door behind him. The lock clicked. For perhaps a count of 10, nothing happened. Then the sound came. It was not a shout. It was something older than a shout. The crystal glass he had taken with him from the table, the one he had not drunk from, hit the wall above the bed and exploded into 1,000 small shards that sprayed across the headboard and the floor. A second sound followed, lower, the sound of a fist coming down against the wooden top of a dresser, and a third, the sound of a chair tipping back against a wall. And then the worst sound of all, Lorenzo DeMarco, the man who had buried his own father without crying, the man who had buried his own wife 6 months ago in front of 300 people without letting his eyes change, made a sound in that small back room that did not belong to a man at all. It was the sound of something tearing. It was the sound of 6 months of every refused tear coming out at once in a single ragged, animal cry that he had to muffle into his own forearm to keep from waking his son. In the living room, Leo opened his eyes. He sat up on the couch, the blanket falling away from his shoulders, and his small face turned toward the hallway. He did not cry. He had cried so much in the last 12 hours that there was no crying left in him for a little while. He just listened, his eyes very wide. Sophia slid down off the dining chair without being told. She crossed the rug in her stockinged feet and climbed up onto the couch beside Leo. She did not hug him. She just took his hand and held it in both of hers in her lap. "He is crying," Leo whispered. "Yes. Is he angry?" Sophia was quiet for a moment. She thought about it the way she thought about everything, with her small face very still. "No," she said softly. "He is hurting. People are loud when they are hurting because they don't have anywhere else to put it." Leo looked at her. "Your dad got hurt too. Did he get loud?" Sophia shook her head. "My dad got quiet. Everybody is different." In the hallway, Marco stood with one hand against the closed bedroom door. He did not knock at first. He let a long minute pass. He let two. Then he knocked once, softly, with the knuckle of his index finger. "Lorenzo. Leave me alone, Marco. Lorenzo, we have to plan. Every minute we lose, he gains. I said leave me alone." Marco closed his eyes. He pressed his forehead briefly against the door frame, the way a father presses his forehead against the door of a son he cannot reach. Then he turned and walked back down the hall to the living room. He sat down heavily on the arm of the couch beside the children. He laid his cane across his knees. He looked at Sophia. "He listens to you, Piccola. I have known him since before he was a man. He does not listen to anyone right now, but I have a feeling. Will you try?" Sophia looked at Marco for a long second. Then she looked at Leo. Leo squeezed her hand. He did not say anything. He did not have to. Sophia slid off the couch and stood up. She walked to the dining table first. She lifted the red car off the silk handkerchief. The panel was closed properly now, the brace seated, the chip back in its slot. She had finished it sometime during the second recording, working quietly with her small hands, while the adults had been listening to her mother's killer speak. She had not let anyone see her working. She had not wanted anyone to feel as if a child were rushing them through their grief. She carried the car in both hands down the hallway. She stopped at the bedroom door. She did not knock with her knuckles, the way Marco had. She placed her small open palm flat against the wood, the way a child puts her hand against a window to a room she has been told not to enter. "Mr. DeMarco, sir," she said quietly. "It's me. Can I come in?" On the other side of the door, Lorenzo was sitting on the edge of the bed with his face in his hands. He had not heard Marco's footsteps go away. He had not heard the small bare feet come down the hall, but he heard her voice, and something in his chest, something that had been locked shut for 6 months, and had only that night been pried at by the small flat end of a screwdriver, opened just a fraction more. He started to say no. The word was already in his mouth. He stopped it. "Come in." The lock turned. The door pushed open. Sophia stepped into the room in her stockinged feet, with the red car held carefully in both hands. She did not look at the broken glass on the floor. She did not look at the overturned chair or the dent in the side of the dresser. She walked across the rug, around the bed, and stopped beside him. She set the red car gently on the nightstand at his elbow. "I fixed it again, sir," she said softly. "Properly this time. It will hold." Lorenzo did not lift his head from his hands. "Why are you not afraid of me, Sophia?" It came out of him almost as a confession. She thought about it. She did not answer fast. "I am afraid of you, sir." That made him lift his head, just an inch. "But," she went on, in the same small, clear voice, "I can tell you are not bad. You are just sad. Bad people don't look at their son the way you look at him. Bad people don't sit in a room alone so other people don't have to hear them cry. Lorenzo's eyes blurred. He did not lower his head this time. He let her see. In 37 years on this earth, in 12 years of running half the East Coast, no one had ever spoken to Lorenzo DeMarco the way this 7-year-old girl in a plain cotton dress had just spoken to him. Not his father, not Marco, not even Isabella, who had loved him more than she should have. No one had ever stood that close to him and named the thing under the cold without flinching. He swallowed once. His throat did not work properly. "Your father," he said. The words came out roughly. "What was he like, Sophia?" She smiled. It was a small smile, but it was real. "He used to say," she said, "that fixing something is not making it new. Fixing something is making it heard. He said most things in the world are not broken. They are only waiting for somebody to listen to them long enough." Lorenzo closed his eyes. A single tear slid down the side of his face. It went down past his temple and into the hair at his ear before he could stop it. He did not wipe it away. He did not have the strength left to lie about it. It was the first tear he had cried since the morning they had told him Isabella was dead. Sophia did not look at it. She had the good manners of a child who had grown up in a house that had known grief. She picked up the small red car from the nightstand and put it back into his hands. She closed his fingers around it. Then she stepped back. "I'll wait outside, sir," she said. "Mr. Marco said you have to plan something." She turned and walked toward the door. Before she reached it, there were quick footsteps in the hall, heavier than hers, and Marco pushed the door open without knocking. His face had gone the color of his hair. "Lorenzo." Lorenzo lifted his head. "Tony just got off the radio with the men we left at the gate. Victor is moving. He has Salvatore Ricci with him, and at least 20 men between them. They know we came to Brooklyn. They do not know which house, but they know the borough, and they are checking every safe location the family has ever used. They will be here in less than 2 hours." Lorenzo looked down at the red car in his hands. He looked at the small girl standing in the doorway, watching him with her quiet, patient eyes. He stood up from the bed. When he spoke, his voice was steady again. Not cold, steady. There was a difference, and only the people in this room would have known how to hear it. "Then we plan?" Lorenzo went to the small mirror over the dresser. The man who looked back at him was not the man who had stood in his living room 6 hours earlier. His shirt was open at the throat. His hair had come loose at the temple. There was a smear of dust along his left sleeve from the tunnel wall, and his eyes had gone red at the edges in a way he could not entirely hide. He filled the basin in the corner with cold water and bent over it. He scrubbed his face once, twice, 3 times. When he straightened, his hair was wet at the front. The redness in his eyes had been pushed back into something closer to ordinary tiredness, and his hands had stopped shaking. He picked up the suit jacket from where he had thrown it over the back of the dented chair. He shook it once, smoothed it, slid it back on. He buttoned the second button. He stood up to his full height in front of the small mirror, and he made himself look. The eyes that looked back at him were not the eyes of the man who had walked into this room. The cold killer was gone. So was the broken husband. What remained was something older than both of those, something Lorenzo had not seen in his own face for a long time. The eyes of a father who has decided. He walked back into the living room. Tony was already standing, the radio in his hand. Marco had moved the laptop to the coffee table. Rosa had Leo in her lap on the couch now, her arms wrapped around him, and Sophia stood between her mother's knees, still holding the red car against her chest. Lorenzo did not waste time. "Tony, get on the radio. Every man we still trust. I want names by the next 10 minutes. Anyone who hesitates, anyone who answers too slow, anyone who asks a question instead of giving you a yes or a no. You mark them, and you tell me. We need to know who is standing where we are standing before the sun comes up." "Yes, boss." Marco shifted in the armchair. He spoke in a voice that did not carry past the 4 walls. "Lorenzo, you should know something before you make those calls. Many of our people have drifted in the last 6 months. While you have been locked in that office of yours, Victor has been making promises. New cuts on the docks, a bigger room at the table, whole territories, in some cases. He has been preparing for this night for a long time. Some of the men you will call tonight will already belong to him. Be ready to hear it in their voices." Lorenzo absorbed it without blinking. "Then we will do what he does not expect," he said. "We do not run, Marco. We do not hide in this apartment and wait for him to come kick the door in. We move first." He turned to Rosa. His voice softened. "Not by much, just enough. Rosa." She looked up from her son's hair. "You and Sophia are leaving Brooklyn. Tony has men we can trust at a private hangar in New Jersey. There is a plane. By tonight, you will be in California, in a house outside of Santa Barbara. You will stay there. You will not call anyone you know. You will not contact any family. 3 months, maybe 6. When this is finished, I will come for you myself and I will bring you home." Rosa nodded. She was already crying without sound. "Yes, Mr. DeMarco. Lorenzo." She nodded again. "Yes, Lorenzo." Sophia stepped forward out of her mother's knees. She had still not let go of the red car. She did not raise her voice. She did not stamp her foot, but her small face had set itself in a particular way, and Lorenzo, looking at her, knew what was coming before she opened her mouth. No, the whole room went still. Rosa's hands came up at once. "Sophia, cara, no, ascolta mama, no mama." The little girl turned her face up to Lorenzo. Her chin did not tremble. Her eyes were perfectly steady. "I am not going to California, sir." Lorenzo knelt down. He did it slowly, the way he had earlier in the bedroom when she had brought him the car. He went down on one knee on the rug so that his eyes were level with hers, and he set his hand on the arm of the couch beside her, not on her shoulder. He did not want to touch a child while telling her something she did not want to hear. "Sophia, Piccola, listen to me. This is not a place for children. The men coming tonight, the men we are going to meet, they will not see you as a little girl. They will see you as the person who opened the car. They will see you the way they see me. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir." "Then you understand why you have to go." "No, sir." He almost smiled. It almost broke him. "Why not, Sophia?" She thought about her answer. She always thought about her answer. When she gave it the way she had given everything else that night, in a small, clear voice with no decoration. "Because I am the one who fixed the car," she said. "The brace I made is still inside. The wire is still loose under it. If the chip stops working again, if anybody else takes it apart, they will break it. I am the only one who knows how to put it back, so I have to stay." She paused. Then she looked over at the couch, at the small boy curled against his nanny's chest with his eyes wide. "And I am not leaving Leo. Mama, please, I am not. He already lost his mom. I am not going to let him think his friend left him too in the same night." Rosa made a sound that was almost a whimper. She pressed the back of her hand against her mouth. "Sophia, amor, please go with Mama, please." Sophia did not turn away from Lorenzo's face. "Mama, I'm not going. I'm sorry." It was Lorenzo who closed his eyes, just for a second. He saw Isabella. He saw his wife, standing in the doorway of his office on that last night, with her hand on the doorframe, saying tomorrow. Then, in a voice he had not understood, was the voice of a woman who had decided. He saw her chin lifted in the same particular way. He saw the same steady eyes. Loyalty was something Lorenzo DeMarco had taken for a man's word. He had bought it. He had paid for it. He had killed for it. In 37 years, he had never been taught it by a child. He opened his eyes. "All right," he said quietly, "but you do exactly what I say, Sophia. Exactly what I say. Every word. Yes, sir. Even if I tell you to crawl. Even if I tell you to be silent. Even if I tell you to leave the red car behind." For one beat she hesitated, looking at the small painted toy in her arms. Then she nodded. "Yes, sir." He stood up. Rosa had her face in her hands now. Lorenzo crossed the room and stopped beside the couch. He bent down. He did not touch her. He just spoke very low, so the children could not hear. "Rosa, I will not let anything happen to her. Do you hear me? I will not let anything happen to her. I would rather every man in this room die first." Rosa nodded into her hands without looking up. Lorenzo turned back to Marco. The plan came out of him in short, clean sentences, the way it used to come out of him in better years. "Tony, you and 4 men take Rosa to the New Jersey hangar. Now, do not come back here. Once the plane is wheels up, you double back to Red Hook. We will meet you at the old warehouse on Pier 42, the one we bought through the Shell Company in 2021. Victor knows it exists. He does not know we still own it. He thinks we sold it to Clean Books last spring." Marco's eyes lit up. "You are going to draw him there. I am going to invite him there." Lorenzo's voice had cooled into something almost calm. "I will send him a message in 2 hours. I will tell him I have copied the chip and I am willing to talk. He will believe it, because that is the kind of move he would make. He will come because he cannot afford not to. And he will bring Salvatore Ricci with him, because Salvatore does not trust him alone in a room with me. They will walk into Pier 42 thinking they are walking into a negotiation. And what will they actually be walking into?" Lorenzo did not smile. "My house," he said, "the one they forgot I built before I let any of them in." The calls began at 5 in the morning. Lorenzo sat at the dining table with a burner phone in front of him, a small notebook on his left, and a pen in his right hand. Marco sat across from him with a second phone. They worked through the list, one name at a time, slow and careful, the way a man diffuses something that has been set in his own house. The first call was to a capo named Bruno in Bay Ridge. Bruno picked up on the third ring. His voice was thick with sleep at first, then thin with surprise, then careful in a way Lorenzo had never heard in him before. He asked too many questions. He wanted to know where Lorenzo was. He wanted to know who was with him. He wanted to know whether Marco was alive. He did not ask about Leo. Lorenzo ended the call after 90 seconds. He drew a line through Bruno's name in the notebook. "Bought," he said, very quietly. Marco said nothing. He simply nodded once and dialed the next number on his own list. It went like that for nearly an hour. The second call was a yes. A man named Paulie in Staten Island, 61 years old, half-deaf in one ear, who had worked for Lorenzo's father longer than Lorenzo had been alive. Paulie did not ask questions. He said, "Tell me where, boss," and waited. Lorenzo gave him an address 2 blocks from the Red Hook warehouse and told him to bring no one he was not prepared to die beside. The third call was a no. The fourth was a no. The fifth was a man who began to cry on the other end of the line, and then asked for forgiveness and then begged Lorenzo to understand. Lorenzo did not curse at him. He simply said, "I understand, Eddie," and ended the call and drew a line through the name. By the time the sky over Brooklyn began to turn from black to the first iron gray of morning, Lorenzo had 2 columns in his notebook. The shorter column was the men he could still call his. The longer column, much longer than he had ever imagined it would be, was the column of men who had quietly moved their loyalty in the months he had spent locked behind the office door of his own house, drinking and refusing to look at the world. The shorter column had 14 names on it. The longer column had 31. Lorenzo set the pen down. He pressed the heels of his hands into his eyes for one slow moment. A soft tap came at the back door of the apartment. Tony, who had returned from the New Jersey hangar an hour earlier, lifted his hand in a wait gesture, drew his pistol, and crossed the room. He looked once through the small peephole, lowered the gun, and unlocked the bolts. A man stepped into the kitchen. He was perhaps 50, broad in the shoulders, with iron gray hair and a heavy black coat. The right cuff of his shirt was stained with what had once been blood and was now mostly dried into the cotton. The left side of his jaw was bruised. He had been in a fight in the last 6 hours, and he had clearly won it, but the winning had cost him. Vinnie Redgun Falcone took off his coat without being asked and laid it across the back of a chair. He looked at Lorenzo across the room. He did not say boss the way Tony said it. He had never said it the way Tony said it. He had known Lorenzo since Lorenzo was 16. Lorenzo. Vinnie. Vinnie did not sit. He walked to the table and set both hands flat on the wood. "You are not going to want to hear what I came here to say." Lorenzo only nodded. 3 of your inside circle are not yours anymore. I have proof on all 3. I would not say it out loud in this room if I did not have the proof in my pocket. He drew 3 small folded papers from the inside pocket of his coat. He laid them on the table side by side, the way a card dealer lays out 3 cards. Lorenzo did not unfold any of them. He did not have to. He read the names handwritten on the outside of each. Sal Jr. Yes. Big Mike from the Astoria crew. Yes. His finger moved to the 3rd paper. It hovered for one breath. He did not need to lift the paper. He knew the handwriting that had written the name on the outside. It was Marco's handwriting, from earlier in the night, when Marco had given Vinnie his short list of please confirm. The name on the 3rd paper was Frank. Lorenzo closed his eyes. Frank Donato had grown up 2 streets away from him. They had ridden the same bus to the same parochial school. Frank had stood next to Lorenzo at his wedding to Isabella, his hand on Lorenzo's shoulder, his eyes shining. Frank had carried Leo on his shoulders at the boys' first communion. Lorenzo had called Frank his brother, in front of the family, on 3 separate occasions, and the family understood what that meant in their world. Frank had a key to the side door of the DeMarco mansion. Frank had been the godfather Lorenzo had chosen if anything ever happened to him. Vinnie waited. "How long?" Lorenzo said. His voice was very low. "At least 8 months. Probably longer. The money started moving through a laundromat in Astoria last March. Victor's name is not on any of it. But I can prove the route." 8 months, Lorenzo repeated. He almost laughed. The sound did not quite get out of his chest. "Before Isabella, even. Before, yes." Tony stepped up behind Lorenzo. He did not say anything for a long moment. Then he laid his big square hand on Lorenzo's shoulder, in the place where Frank's hand had rested in the wedding photograph that still hung in the long hall of the DeMarco mansion. Boss, Tony said. His voice was unusually gentle. This is how our world works. You know this. You have known it since you were a boy. Loyalty is a flower that needs water. You stopped watering. He came along with a bucket. I know how our world works, Tony. I know you know. That is why I do not want Leo to live in it. The kitchen went very quiet. Vinny lowered his head. Marco did not lift his. After a moment, Lorenzo opened his eyes. He picked up the pen and wrote Frank at the very top of the longer column, above all the other names, and drew a single, careful line through it. He set the pen down again. Get some sleep, Vinny. We move at sundown. I will need you on my right at Pier 42. Vinny did not say thank you. He did not need to. He simply nodded once, picked up his coat, and went out the door Tony had let him in through. In the small back bedroom, the one Lorenzo had broken glass in earlier, Sophia and Leo had been put to bed together, head to foot on the same narrow mattress. The way children sleep at sleepovers. Rosa had left for California on the dawn flight an hour ago. She had kissed her daughter on the forehead, and then on both cheeks, and then on the forehead again. And Sophia had not cried until the apartment door had closed behind her mother, and the lock had clicked shut. She was not crying now. She was lying on her side, propped up on one elbow, telling Leo a story in a small voice to keep him from being afraid. Lorenzo stopped in the doorway. He did not go in. He leaned his shoulder against the frame and listened. My dad used to say, Sophia was whispering, that people are like things. Some are broken because they have been used too long, and you can't fix those. You just say thank you and you put them down gently. But some are not broken at all. They are only stuck. Leo's voice was thick with sleep. How do you know which is which? You listen to them, like with the car. If there is still something inside trying to work, then they are only stuck. You have to know the difference. Because if you try to fix the ones that are really broken, you hurt yourself. And if you don't try to fix the ones that are only stuck, then they stay stuck forever, and that is sad. A small pause. Sophia. What about my dad? There was no hesitation at all in her answer. Your dad is only stuck. Lorenzo lowered his head. He did not let either of them hear him. He turned quietly and walked back down the hall and out through the kitchen and onto the small concrete balcony at the back of the apartment, the one that overlooked the alley and the rooftops of the bakery next door. The sky over Brooklyn had gone from iron to a faint, dirty rose. Somewhere across the river, a tugboat was sounding its horn over and over in the slow, patient way of a thing that had no idea any of this was happening. Lorenzo pressed both his hands flat on the cold metal railing and lowered his head. The phone in his suit pocket buzzed. He took it out. The number was unknown. The message was 3 lines long. You have 24 hours to bring me the chip. After that, I will not be the only one looking for it. And tell the little girl who fixed the car that she has a very nice grandmother in a green house on Wyckoff Street. We know exactly where she used to live. Lorenzo's hand closed around the phone, so hard the screen cracked under his thumb. Victor knew about Sophia. Lorenzo did not wait 24 hours. He stood on the balcony for less than a minute after the message came through. Then he turned, walked back into the apartment, and made the decision out loud, the way he had once made decisions for an empire. We move now. Marco looked up from his laptop. Now. He thinks he has a day. He is wrong. The longer we wait, the more time he has to set his own room. We hit him in hours. Vinny was already on his feet, reaching for his coat. Tony was already keying his radio. By 8 in the morning, the small apartment over Carmine's Pizza had been split in 2. Marco and Vinny took Sophia and Leo through a second tunnel that Lorenzo had not known existed until that hour, down through the bakery basement next door, into a waiting car, and up to a small brownstone in Brooklyn Heights that belonged on paper to a retired cardiologist who had been Marco's cousin's roommate at university 40 years ago. 6 of Lorenzo's most trusted street men were waiting there. 2 stayed inside with the children. 4 took positions across the block in different cars and at different angles. Sophia did not speak as they moved her. She held the red car against her chest inside the pink canvas backpack, and she held Leo's hand, and she watched everything. She watched the way Marco walked, slightly favoring his right leg now from the running of the previous night. She watched the way Vinny's eyes never stopped moving across the roof lines. She was learning, the way a child learns who has decided she is going to remember. At the brownstone, Marco set the laptop down on the dining table. He turned to Sophia. Piccola, if anything goes wrong here, if anyone comes through that door who is not me or Vinny or Mr. DeMarco, you take Leo and you go to the back bedroom and you go through the small door inside the closet. There is a passage. You do not stop until you are in the basement. There is a man named Carmine waiting there. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir." "Repeat it back to me." She did, word for word. Marco nodded once. He bent and kissed the top of her head, the small Italian benediction old men give to children they have decided are theirs to protect. Then he straightened, picked up the laptop, and went back to work. Across the East River, Lorenzo and Tony were already in motion. By 10 in the morning, 5 of the 14 names in Lorenzo's short column had been gathered in a small machine shop 2 blocks from the waterfront. Paulie from Staten Island, Vinny's younger brother, Sal, a man named Mario, who had been Isabella's driver, a grizzled, quiet shooter named Big Joe, who had not worked in 8 years but who picked up his phone on the first ring when Lorenzo called him, and Tony's own younger nephew, Dom, 26 years old, and faster on a trigger than any man in the borough. Lorenzo did not give a long speech. He had never been good at speeches. Pier 42. Warehouse on the south end. The one we used to call the Blue House. He thinks we sold it. We did not. He laid out a folded blueprint on the workbench. 2 side doors here and here. Main rolling door at the front. Catwalk along the upper east wall. 3 skylights. 2 of them painted over. 1 of them still clean. He will come in through the main door because he will want to see me. He always wanted to see me. He will bring Salvatore Ricci with him, because Salvatore does not trust him alone in a room with me anymore. Their men will fan out along these lines because that is the way Salvatore trained them. We will be here, 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 here. His finger moved across the paper. I will be in the open. I will be the bait. Tony will be on the catwalk. Vinny will not be there. He stays with the children. Paulie has the side door east. Mario has the side door west. Big Joe and Dom have the skylight. Sal stays low at the rolling door behind a stack of pallets and closes the back of the room when they walk in. He looked up at the 5 faces. They will not see us until I want them to. Tony, beside him, set a hand flat on the bench. And you are sure he will come? Lorenzo's smile was not a smile. He will come. I am going to send him exactly the wrong message, in exactly the right way, and he will not be able to keep himself from coming. He took out the burner phone. He typed slowly. Victor, I have copied the chip. The original is gone. The copy is with me, and I am willing to talk. Just you and me. No men. Pier 42, the Blue House, 11 o'clock tonight. Come alone or I burn the copy on the dock in front of you and we go to war with nothing in either of our pockets but our own teeth. He paused. Then he added one more line, because he knew Victor. The girl does not know anything. Leave her alone. This is between us. He sent it. Tony watched him over his shoulder. He will bring Salvatore and 12 men. Yes. He will not come alone. No. He will think I am a fool. He has thought I was a fool for years now. We are going to let him keep thinking it until 11 o'clock tonight. The reply came back 4 minutes later. 11. I'll be there. That was all. 3 words from a man who had murdered a wife and pretended to mourn her for half a year. Lorenzo put the phone face down on the bench. He turned and looked through the open shop doors at the gray sky over the water. Eat something, he said to the 5 men. Sleep if you can. We work at sundown. The Blue House at Pier 42 had not been used in 3 years. It still smelled faintly of the salt and diesel and old shrink wrap of the cargo years, but the dust on the high steel rafters was thick now, and the small office at the back of the warehouse had a phone on the wall that no longer had a tone. Lorenzo and his men were inside by 9 in the evening. By 10:30, they were in position. By 10:45, no one was moving, no one was speaking. Only the slow tick of the salt water under the pier and the occasional far cry of a gull. At 3 minutes past 11, headlights cut across the rolling door from outside. Lorenzo, standing alone in the open center of the warehouse with the burner phone in one hand and his pistol tucked into the small of his back under his jacket, heard the car doors. He counted them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He kept counting. He stopped at 13. He almost smiled. The small side door rolled up first, not the main one, which told him something useful about Victor's caution. 2 of Salvatore's men slipped in first, low, fast, sweeping the corners with the muzzles of small machine pistols. Lorenzo did not move. He let them see him standing in the open under the single hanging work light he had ordered left on. When they were satisfied that the room was empty except for him, they spoke into their wrist microphones. The big rolling door began to rattle upward. Victor walked in first. He was dressed in a black overcoat now, and a black scarf, and the small graze along his temple had been bandaged neatly. He walked with his shoulders back. He walked like a man who had already won. Behind him, 10 more men fanned out in 2 arcs along the side walls of the warehouse. Last of all, slow, came Salvatore Ricci, 55 years old, heavy-set, white-haired, a black walking stick in one hand. He stopped just inside the door, 10 feet behind Victor, and his eyes went up to the rafters and around the room with the patience of an old wolf who had survived this long by not being in a hurry. Lorenzo took one slow step forward. He did not raise his hands. He did not raise his voice. "Hello, Victor." Victor smiled. It was a slow, hungry smile. "Lorenzo, after all these years, after all the years I spent eating your father's leftovers and pretending I was full, after every Christmas dinner where I had to listen to you give that same speech about family, after every meeting where you sat at the head of the table and signed the papers I had written, finally I get to stand in front of you and say it out loud." He took another step forward. "You are a stupid man, Lorenzo." Lorenzo's pulse did not change. "Why?" he said. Victor's smile widened. "Why I came tonight, or why you are stupid. Both, perhaps. Why her, Victor?" Victor's smile thinned at the edges. For a moment, he looked away. Just for a moment. Then he looked back, and his face was even, and his voice came out smooth. "Because she was too smart, Lorenzo. That was always Isabella's problem. She figured out the routes through the docks. She figured out the cuts I was taking. She figured out my arrangement with Salvatore. She came to me, you know, not to you, to me. She gave me a chance. I offered her a piece, a clean piece, 20% off the top, no questions. She stays at home and she keeps quiet, and your boy never has to know anything." She refused. "She said she was going to tell you that night. She said she was going to tell you everything as soon as you got off that phone call." He shrugged, a small, terrible shrug. "She did not give me a choice." Lorenzo's hand closed at his side. The knuckles went white. "You had a choice," he said. His voice was almost soft. "You had every choice in the world. You chose wrong." Salvatore Ricci's eyes flicked up to the rafters one more time. This time, he saw something. His mouth opened to shout. Lorenzo raised one finger. The work light overhead went black, and at the same instant, every other light in the blue house came on at once. The whole warehouse went from a single pool of yellow to flat white halogen, 4 banks of stadium lamps hidden in the rafters that Lorenzo had wired in himself the previous afternoon. Salvatore's men had been looking up into shadow. Now they were looking up into a sun. Tony fired first. He fired from the catwalk above the east wall, 2 clean shots, and 2 of Salvatore's men dropped before any of them had even gotten their hands up to shield their eyes. Big Joe and Dom came down through the clean skylight on a fast line, on ropes Lorenzo had set that morning, and they hit the floor already firing. Paulie kicked open the east side door behind Salvatore's right flank and shot the 2 men nearest him before they had finished turning around. Mario came in from the west the same way. Sal slammed the rolling door shut behind them with a hand on the chain, and it crashed down so hard the whole frame shook. The blue house became a different room in under 9 seconds. There were perhaps 30 seconds after that of pure, deafening noise. Lorenzo had drawn his own pistol from the small of his back the moment the lights had changed, and he was firing into the cross of the warehouse from the only spot in the room that had been pre-cleared on his plan, with Tony's cover keeping that lane open above him. When the gunfire stopped, 8 of Salvatore Ricci's men were down. Salvatore Ricci himself was not in the room anymore. He had moved faster for an old man than any of them had expected. He had gone backward through the small side door behind him, the one Mario had not yet had time to swing around to. And by the time Mario got there, an engine was already roaring on the pier outside. Victor Moretti was on his knees in the middle of the warehouse floor. His coat was open. His hands were empty, raised, palms out. A small line of blood was running down from his hairline where the butt of Tony's pistol had cracked him on the way down off the catwalk. He was breathing hard. He was alive. Lorenzo walked across the warehouse floor. He stopped 2 feet in front of him. He did not raise his gun. He did not raise his voice. "Hello, Victor," he said again, very quietly. "We are not finished." Tony brought a chair. It was an old metal folding chair from the small office at the back of the warehouse, the one with the dead phone on the wall. He set it down in the middle of the cleared floor under the bank of halogen lamps. He did not have to be told twice. He took Victor by the shoulders, pulled him up off the concrete, and pushed him down into the chair the way a man pushes a sack of something heavy onto a hand truck. Big Joe and Dom worked the ropes. Paulie watched the side doors. Mario stepped out the small east entrance to check the pier outside. The smell of cordite hung low across the warehouse, and somewhere along the south wall a thin line of smoke was rising from where one of the halogen lamps had taken a stray round. Lorenzo did not move yet. He stood 10 feet away with his pistol held loose at his side, and watched Victor's wrists being bound to the steel arms of the chair and his ankles to the legs. The rope was thick, 3/4 of an inch, the kind they used on the docks. The knots were the kind Tony had been taught by men who had taught him to make sure a man could not lift the chair off the floor. When it was done, Tony stepped back. Victor lifted his head. A small line of blood was sliding down the side of his nose from the crack in his hairline. His lip was split. His left eye had begun to close. But the smile was still there, not the smooth smile from his years in Lorenzo's living room. A different one, smaller, tighter. The one underneath the other one. The one Lorenzo realized, looking at it now, had been there the whole time, and he had simply not let himself see it. Lorenzo walked forward. He stopped 2 feet in front of the chair. He did not crouch. He did not bend. He stood at his full height and looked down at Victor Moretti the way a man looks down a long road he has finally decided to walk back along. From the beginning, Lorenzo said. All of it. Victor laughed. It was a small, dry, broken sound, and it brought up more blood from his lip. He spat once onto the concrete beside the chair leg. You think you are a king, Lorenzo. You have always thought you were a king. You sat at the head of that table the day after your father was put in the ground, and you started pointing your finger and giving orders, and acting as if any of it had been built by you. His voice climbed a little. There was an old, ugly resentment in it that he had clearly been chewing on for years. It was not built by you. I built it. I ran it. I was on those docks at 4 a.m. while you were upstairs in that mansion drinking imported water and reading the Wall Street Journal like a banker. I was talking to the longshoremen. I was paying the right cops in the right precincts. I was sitting in back rooms with Salvatore Ricci and Tommy Lucchini and Joey Cataldo while you signed the papers I put in front of you, and you thought that was what running an empire looked like. Your name was on the door. My fingerprints were on every brick in the wall. Lorenzo did not interrupt. He let him talk. He had been waiting 6 months for a man to talk, and then she figured it out. Victor's smile thinned. Of course she did. Your wife. The smartest person in your whole house, and you never once asked her opinion on anything more serious than a curtain. She started watching me at family dinners. She started reading the manifests I left on your desk. She got into your computer one night when you fell asleep on the couch with your face in a glass of brandy, and she copied 3 months of routing data onto a flash drive. 3 months. Do you know what I could do with 3 months of routing data? Do you know what she could do with it? Why her, Victor? I am telling you why. You are telling me how. Tell me why. Victor's smile cracked. Because she would not take the offer, he said. His voice dropped. The bravado came out of it. What was underneath was uglier and smaller. I went to her, Lorenzo. I went to her like a gentleman. I gave her a chance. 20% off the top of every shipment for the rest of her life. No paperwork. No risk. Stay home. Raise the boy. Look the other way. She could have walked away from this with more money than her grandchildren could have spent. She looked at me across her own kitchen table, with your son asleep upstairs, and she said, Victor, I am telling Lorenzo tonight, the moment he is off the phone. I asked her to think about it for 1 hour. She would not even give me 1 hour. She said, I have already thought about it for 3 months, Victor, and I am not the kind of woman who lets her husband get killed in his own bed. His mouth twisted. She did not give me a choice. You had every choice. She did not give me. You had every choice, Victor. Lorenzo's voice was very quiet. It did not need to be loud. You could have taken the offer back. You could have gone to ground. You could have left the country. You could have come to me, on your knees, and told me the truth, and I would have killed you fast and clean for what you had been doing. Any of those choices was open to you. You chose the one that left my son without a mother. Victor laughed again. It was not a real laugh. He coughed through it. His chest heaved once. She hid it in his toy car. Did you know that? In the boy's toy car. I tore that house apart for 6 months looking for what she had. I went through your office. I went through her desk. I went through her closets, her safe deposit box, her dressmaker, her cousin's apartment in Queens. I had a man on her computer in the cloud. 6 months I have been looking. 6 months. His head dropped back against the steel rim of the chair and he laughed up at the rafters. And it was sitting on the floor of your son's bedroom the entire time. Because she knew. She knew I would never look there. She knew the one place in your whole house I would never think to put a hand was inside a child's toy. He brought his head back down. The smile was almost admiring now. Almost soft. She was smarter than both of us, Lorenzo. She was smarter than every man in this room, and we never once stopped to notice. Lorenzo's hand tightened around the grip of the pistol at his side. He lifted it. He raised it slowly. the way a man raises something heavy, and he pointed it at the middle of Victor Moretti's forehead from a distance of 2 feet, and his finger moved to the inside of the trigger guard. Victor did not flinch. He looked up the barrel of the gun and he smiled, and there was something in his eyes that was almost relief. He had known, since the lights had come on in the rafters, since the moment Tony had cracked him across the temple, that this was how it ended for him. He had made his peace with it on the floor in the few seconds before they had put him in the chair. He was ready. That was what stopped Lorenzo. His finger paused on the trigger. A small voice rose up in the back of his head. He did not summon it. It rose by itself. Some are broken because they have been used too long, and you can't fix those. You just say thank you and you put them down gently. But some are not broken at all. They are only stuck. Sophia's voice, in the dark hallway of the safe house, telling Leo a story to put him to sleep. Lorenzo's pulse moved once, slowly. No, Victor was not stuck. Victor had not been stuck for a very long time. Victor was the other kind, the kind Sophia's father had said you said thank you to and put down gently, the kind you did not try to fix. But killing him in this chair, in this warehouse, with a single bullet, that was not putting him down gently. That was giving him exactly what he had decided he wanted the moment the lights had come on. That was the easy ending. That was the mercy. And Victor Moretti had not earned a mercy. Lorenzo's hand lowered. The pistol came down to his side, then back into the small of his back, under the jacket. Victor's smile faltered for the first time. "What are you doing?" he said. Lorenzo did not answer at once. He turned, very slightly, toward Tony. "Call Detective Halloran at the 61st. Wake him up. Tell him I have a man here on Pier 42 who wants to give a statement about the murder of Isabella DeMarco. Tell him to bring 2 cars and the federal agent he has been trying to get me to talk to for the last 3 years. Tell him the chip is real. Tell him there are recordings, ledgers, account routes, and a list of names. Tell him the man in this chair is going to spend the rest of his life in a small concrete room with a metal toilet and a television that only plays the local news." Tony's eyes flicked from Lorenzo to Victor and back to Lorenzo. "Boss. Do it, Tony." "Yes, boss." Tony took out his phone and walked 4 steps away. The line connected. He began to speak in a low voice. Lorenzo turned back to the chair. Victor was no longer smiling. "You are going to live, Victor," Lorenzo said. His voice was even. There was no triumph in it. There was almost no anger. "You are going to live for a very long time. You are going to live inside a system that does not let you pick your own meals or your own clothes or your own visitors. The evidence Isabella collected is going to put you on trial for murder, for racketeering, for smuggling, for every line you ever crossed since the night my father died. They will offer you a deal to give up Salvatore Ricci. You will take it, because that is the kind of man you are, and it will not save you, because the recordings are too clean. You will sit in a small room for the rest of your life, and you will hear my wife's voice on a tape in a courtroom, and you will remember that a 7-year-old girl in a plain dress is the reason you are there." Victor's breath caught. "That," Lorenzo said quietly, "is much worse than a bullet." He turned and walked away and did not look back. While Lorenzo had been walking away from the chair, Salvatore Ricci had been driving. The old wolf had not lasted 55 years in their world by trusting any man, and he had trusted Victor Moretti least of all. The moment the engine of his car had cleared the south end of Pier 42, Salvatore had picked up his own phone and made his own call, in a voice low and flat with controlled fury, to 4 men he had positioned the night before in a separate vehicle, 2 blocks from the Brooklyn Heights brownstone, whose address he had paid a great deal of money to learn from one of the men he had bought from Lorenzo's Circle. The brownstone where the children were. Marco heard them before they reached the front door. He had been sitting at the dining room table with the laptop open and his pistol laid across his knee, reading through the documents on the chip for the 3rd time, when his old soldier's ear caught the wrong sound on the stairs outside. Not the regular pace of a tenant coming home, not the slow, careful pace of his own man at the front. A faster pace, multiple feet, moving together in the practiced rhythm of men who had done this before. He stood up so quickly that the chair tipped back behind him and hit the floor. Vinny was already moving. He had heard it too. Marco crossed the apartment in 5 long strides. Sophia and Leo were on the rug in the living room, Sophia kneeling, the red car between them. She had been showing Leo how she had folded the paperclip into the brace inside. Leo had been listening with the small, serious attention of a child being trusted with a real thing for the first time. Marco scooped Leo up off the rug with one arm and grabbed Sophia's hand with the other. "Bedroom. Subito. Now." He did not have time to explain. He did not need to. Sophia did not ask. She let him pull her, And as she went, she caught the strap of the pink backpack off the back of the couch with her free hand and dragged it with her. The red car was already inside. She had not let it out of her sight in 20 hours. Behind them, the front door of the apartment exploded inward off its hinges. Marco shoved both children into the small back bedroom. He turned the bolt. He turned the second bolt. He spun. Sophia, listen to me. The window. The fire escape. Go down to the alley. There is a kitchen door on the left side. Knock 3 times. Twice. 3 times. Do you remember the code? Yes, sir. Do not stop. Do not look up. Do not look back. Take Leo and go. Yes, sir. He did not kiss her forehead this time. There was no time. He pressed his hand briefly against her cheek instead. The old, fast benediction of a soldier who knew he might not see a thing again. And then he turned, drew his pistol, and went back through the small connecting door to meet whatever was coming through the front. Sophia did not waste even a heartbeat after the door closed. She climbed onto the bed in her stockinged feet, pulled the heavy curtain aside, and shoved the window up. The iron grill of the fire escape was just outside. Cold November air rushed into the room. Behind her, from the other side of the wall, the first 3 gunshots cracked. Very fast, very close. There was a heavier sound, a grunt, then Vinny's voice in the front room shouting something in Italian. She turned to Leo. He was standing in the middle of the rug holding the red car against his chest. Leo, look at me. His eyes came up to hers. We are going down the ladder. You go first. I will be right behind you. You do not stop. You do not look up. You hold onto the metal with both hands and you go down. Do you understand? Yes. Put the car in the bag. He did. She zipped it. She slid the backpack onto his small shoulders rather than her own, because the straps were just a hair too long for her and just right for him, and because if anything happened, she wanted the car on Leo's back, with Leo, not on hers. She helped him through the window. She held the iron rail for him as he stepped onto the grill. She climbed out after him, pulled the window closed behind her in case it might buy Marco one more second, and they began to go down. The fire escape was old. It groaned under their small weight. The ladder at the second floor stuck, and Sophia had to lean out and put both her hands on it and pull until it gave way and slid down with a metal complaint that felt as loud as a bell in the cold. Above them, on the second floor, the bedroom window was now lit by the flash of more gunfire from inside the apartment. Marco was still alive. He was still firing. So was Vinny. Sophia went down the ladder first this time. She went down quickly. She reached the alley, turned, and held up her arms. Leo, jump. I'll catch you. He was too heavy for her to actually catch. He would have knocked her flat. But she had said it, and he believed her, and that was enough. He sat on the bottom rung, swung his legs, and pushed off. She caught him by the waist with both arms, and his weight took them both down to one knee on the cold concrete. But neither of them cried out. She got back up. She took his hand. They turned to run. A black sedan pulled in across the mouth of the alley. Its headlights blinked once, then off. 2 doors opened. Salvatore Ricci stepped out from the rear passenger side. He was alone except for his driver, who stayed in the car with the engine running. He still had his cane in one hand. The other hand was empty. He did not need a gun. He had 4 men upstairs in that apartment doing the work of a gun, and he had decided this part of the work belonged to him. He stopped 6 feet from the children. "Little girl," he said. His voice was almost gentle. That was the most frightening thing about it. "You have something that belongs to me." Sophia stepped back. Her body moved on its own, putting herself between Leo and the old man. She felt Leo's small hand fist in the back of her dress. "No, sir." "Yes, sir. The red car, the toy, with the chip inside. Hand it to me, and you and the boy walk away tonight. I am not in the business of hurting children, but I am in the business of finishing things, and that car has my name on it now. Give it to me." Sophia's chin came up. "No." Salvatore Ricci smiled. He had a kind smile. He must have spent 50 years making it look kind. "You are a smart little girl. I can see that. You figured out a thing that grown men could not figure out in a whole evening. That is impressive. I respect it. I will tell you what I am going to do. I am going to count to 3. After 3, I am going to walk over and I am going to take the bag off the boy's shoulders myself. I will be very gentle. He will not even feel it. But if you make me come over there for it, little girl, then I am going to take you both with me when I leave. And then your mother is never going to see you again. Do you understand?" Sophia did not answer. That is not the answer of a smart girl. Let us try again. You are a smart girl. So now you are a smart girl who is also being smart. Give me the bag. He took one step forward. Brakes screamed at the other end of the alley. A black SUV came in off the avenue at 40 miles an hour, sideways, half on the curb, and braked so hard the suspension dropped and bounced. The back door was open before it had stopped moving. Lorenzo was already out of it. Tony came out of the passenger side a half-second later, and they were both already moving, and they were both already firing. Salvatore Ricci was old. He was not slow. He turned faster than a man with a cane should have been able to turn. His free hand went inside the lapel of his long black coat for the pistol he had not bothered to draw before. He did not get it out. 2 shots took him in the chest. A third, slightly higher, took him in the throat. He was on his back on the cold concrete of the alley before his cane finished falling. His driver had been raising a small machine pistol from inside the car. Tony's 4th shot went straight through the open passenger window, and the driver slumped against the wheel. The horn began to sound, one long, flat note that bounced off the brick of the alley walls. It was over in less than 4 seconds. Lorenzo crossed the alley at a run. He came down on both knees on the concrete in front of the 2 children and threw his arms around them. He pulled them in against his chest, both of them at once, his face pressed for one short, hard moment into Sophia's hair, and the other side of his face into the small curve of Leo's neck. And he did not say anything at all for several seconds. He just held them. His heart was hammering so hard against his ribs that Sophia could feel it through the front of his shirt. "Are you all right?" His voice was almost not a voice. "Look at me. Look at me. Both of you. Are you hurt anywhere?" Leo shook his head against his father's shoulder. Sophia, who had been so steady the entire time, finally let out a small breath that was almost a sob and pressed her face into Lorenzo's collar. She did not cry, even now, but she shook for the first time since the lights had gone out in the tunnel under the gardens. Lorenzo lifted his head. Above them, in the second-floor window of the brownstone, a curtain shifted. Marco's face appeared in the broken pane. The left side of his white hair was matted dark with blood, and his glasses were gone, but he was upright. He nodded once, slowly, when Lorenzo's eyes met his. Behind him, Vinny appeared, holding his ribs with one hand and a pistol with the other. Vinny was limping. Both men were standing. They were standing. Lorenzo pressed his forehead briefly against the top of Sophia's head, and then against the top of Leo's, and he let himself, just for 1 second in the cold of that alley, with the horn of a dead man's car wailing into the November air, close his eyes. Morning came slowly over Brooklyn Heights. The sun lifted itself above the East River in a pale, tired gold, the kind of light that does not warm so much as it reminds the world that another day has decided to begin. It slid through the cracked pane of the brownstone window where Marco's face had appeared a few hours earlier, and it fell at last across the rug of the small living room where the worst night of Lorenzo DeMarco's life had finally, quietly, ended. Everyone in the apartment was alive. Marco was alive. Vinny was alive. Tony was alive. Paulie and Mario and Big Joe and Dom were alive, scattered now across 3 safe houses and 1 private clinic in Bay Ridge, where a doctor on the family's payroll was stitching shoulders and ribs without asking the kinds of questions that other doctors would have asked. Rosa had been brought back from the New Jersey hangar before the plane had ever taken off, because by the time the wheels had been ready, the world had already turned, and there was no longer anywhere safer for her to be than in the same room as her daughter. In the middle of the rug, 2 children slept. Leo was curled on his side with the corner of his small fist pressed against his mouth. Sophia lay next to him, on her back, one arm flung out across his shoulder in the protective half-embrace she had not let go of since the alley. Between them, tucked under Leo's chin and inside the curve of Sophia's elbow, was the small red toy car. The painted metal caught the morning light along one of its tired curves and held it there, soft and quiet, like a small ember that had refused to go out. Lorenzo sat on the floor beside them. He had not slept. He had not even tried. His suit jacket was folded over the arm of the couch behind him. The sleeves of his white shirt were rolled to the elbow. There was a bruise along the side of his jaw from where someone in the blue house had clipped him with the back of an elbow during the fight, and he had not yet noticed it. He was sitting with his back against the couch and his knees drawn up and one of his large hands very gently smoothing the dark hair on his son's forehead, over and over, in the slow rhythm of a man relearning a thing he had let himself forget how to do. From the kitchen came the soft sound of a coffee pot. Rosa carried 2 cups across the rug, careful not to wake the children. She set one down on the low table beside Lorenzo, knelt for a moment to look at her daughter's sleeping face, and then sat on the edge of the armchair across from him with her own cup held in both hands. "Mr. DeMarco," she began. "Lorenzo." She paused. "Lorenzo," she said. The word came out very small, like a thing she had not been allowed to hold for a long time. Kohei goitoi Lorenzo, he said again, more gently, and she nodded, and the tears that had been gathering in her eyes for an hour finally let themselves go down her face. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you, thank you, thank you. He did not answer. There was no answer for what she was thanking him for, because he was sitting in front of her with his hand on his son's hair only because her 7-year-old daughter had decided not to run, and he was not yet ready to find the words for that. Marco came in through the kitchen door, slowly, leaning a little more heavily on the cane than he had the day before. The cut along his temple had been cleaned and taped. His white hair had been combed back, almost neatly, except for one stubborn place above his left ear. He looked very old in the morning light. He also looked, Lorenzo thought, more at peace than he had looked in months. He lowered himself into the second armchair with a small grunt. The police took Victor, he said quietly, so as not to wake the children. Detective Halloran came himself. He brought the federal agent, the one with the long Polish name, and 3 cars. They have the chip. They have the original recordings. They have the ledger pages, the routing data, every account. Halloran told me, off the record, that Victor will not see the outside of a federal facility in this lifetime. He is finished. And Salvatore, dead in the alley, his driver as well. Salvatore's organization will not last the week. His people will scatter to the Lucchese, to the Genovese, to whoever offers them a corner first. By Friday, he will be a name on the side of a mausoleum and a paragraph in the newspaper. And our people, Marco let out a slow breath. Frank is gone. He cleared out his apartment in Astoria at some point before sundown last night. He took the cash he had on hand and a passport I am told he has been preparing for almost a year. Sal Jr. and Big Mike went with him. They are halfway to somewhere we will probably never find them. And to be honest, my friend, I am not sure I want to find them. He looked at Lorenzo over the rim of his coffee cup. We have won, Lorenzo. By any measure men in our world know how to measure. We have won. Lorenzo's hand kept moving over his son's hair. He did not look up. No, Marco. No, we did not win. We survived. There is a difference. A man can survive a fire and still have nothing left in the house but smoke. We are still standing in the smoke. That is not the same thing as winning. Marco was silent for a long moment. Then he said, What are you thinking, my friend? Lorenzo lifted his eyes for the first time. He looked across the rug at the small girl sleeping with her arm across his son's shoulder. He looked at the red car between them. He looked at the morning light on the wall. I am thinking that I am going to take it apart. Take what apart, Lorenzo? Most of it. His voice was quiet, but there was no question in it. The docks I will turn into a clean shipping business. There is a real company underneath the dirty one. I have known that for years. I will hire the right lawyers and I will do the work. The casinos? I will close some and sell the others to people whose names I will check 3 times before I sign anything. The smuggling routes? Every one of them, I will end. Not slowly, not over a year. I will end them. I will pay off the men who can be paid off, and I will let the others find new employers. And I will not look back. Marco set his coffee cup down on the side table very slowly. Lorenzo, you are talking about half a century of work. Your father's work. Your grandfather's work. I know what I am talking about, Marco. You will not be the man you were. I do not want to be the man I was. The old consigliere looked at him for a long time. He looked at the bruise on his friend's jaw, and the suit jacket folded over the arm of the couch, and the hand that had not stopped smoothing the boy's hair, and the small girl with the red car tucked into her elbow, and the woman in the chair beside him with tears still running quietly down her face. He looked at all of it, the way an old man looks at a painting he is being shown for the last time. And then, very slowly, he nodded. Isabella, he said softly, would be proud of you. Lorenzo's eyes filled. He did not look away. He let his old friend see, the way he had let a 7-year-old girl see in the bedroom the night before. He had spent his whole life convinced that letting another person see his face was a kind of dying. He understood now, sitting on the floor of a borrowed apartment with his son asleep against his thigh, that it had been the opposite the whole time. After a long minute, he said, almost to himself, She tried to tell me. The night before she died, she came to my office. She wanted to tell me everything. I told her to wait. I told her in a minute. I told her tomorrow. I will spend the rest of my life knowing that she stood in that doorway and waited for me to look up. And I did not look up. Marco did not try to argue with him. He only said, She would not want you to spend the rest of your life there. I know. She would want you to spend it here. His old hand gestured slowly at the rug, at the children, at Rosa. She would want you to spend it with them. I know that too. On the rug, Sophia stirred. Her small hand tightened on Leo's shoulder, then loosened. She did not wake. She turned her face slightly toward Lorenzo, the way a flower will turn toward the side of the room where a lamp has been turned on, even in her sleep. The red car shifted between them, and for one short instant, in the morning light, the dent of color along its side was the same red as the small ember Lorenzo had felt come alive inside his chest the night before, in the small back bedroom, when she had said, "You are not bad, you are only sad." He bent forward. He pressed his lips very gently against the dark hair on the top of his son's head. He stayed there for a moment. Then, just as gently, he laid his hand for one short breath on the top of Sophia's head as well, the way Marco had laid his hand on her the day before, the old Italian benediction of a man who had decided that a child belonged to him to protect. Neither of them woke. Outside the cracked window, the city of New York was beginning to make its morning sounds. A garbage truck somewhere 2 streets over, a church bell on the far side of the heights, the distant horn of a tugboat on the river, slow and patient, the same one that had been sounding all night and all morning, as if the world had decided that no matter what happened in the dark, it would always make the same sound at sunrise. Lorenzo DeMarco closed his eyes for a long moment, and when he opened them, the man inside them was a different man. This is where this story ends. It ends in a small apartment in Brooklyn Heights, in the gold of a November morning, with 2 sleeping children, 1 tired mother, 1 old friend, and 1 man who had once owned half a coast and was now quietly deciding to give most of it away. Because in the end, the most important things in our lives are never the things we can buy. They are never the empires we build, the rooms we control, the people who bow to us when we walk in. The most important things are very small, and very quiet, and very easy to overlook if we are too busy. A small red toy car on a child's nightstand, the voice of someone we have lost, hidden inside the only place no one thought to look, the hand of a 7-year-old girl who decides to stay when she could have run, a man who finally, after years of trying to control the world, learns that the greatest strength of all is knowing when to lay something down. Sometimes the things we love most are not broken. They are only stuck. They are only waiting for someone to listen long enough to hear them. If this story touched your heart in any way today, please take just a moment to like this video and to subscribe to our channel. It helps us more than you know, and it lets us keep bringing you stories like this one every single day. If you have time, share this story with someone you love, someone you have not spoken to in a while, someone who might need to be reminded today that it is never too late to choose differently. We would love to hear from you in the comments below. What part of Lorenzo and Sophia's story touched you the most? Have you ever had a moment in your own life when a small, unexpected person taught you something that changed the way you saw the world? Has there ever been a time when you were the one who was only stuck and someone took the time to listen long enough to help you start again? Please tell us in the comments. Tell us where in the world you are watching from today. We read every message, and your words mean more to this small channel than we could ever explain. To everyone who has stayed with us all the way to the end of this story, thank you. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your heart. Thank you for choosing to spend a piece of your day with us. We wish you and your family good health, peaceful days, gentle nights, and a home full of the kind of love that does not need to be loud to be real. Take care of yourselves. Take care of the people around you. And remember, as Sophia's father used to say, that fixing something is not making it new again. Fixing something is making it heard. Goodbye for now. We will see you in the next story.